Okay, great. Let me officially welcome everyone to the room. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining today. So we're here to talk about, I think, one of the most pressing concerns I've been hearing from people over the summer about designing courses for the fall is how exactly do we design courses for not only the scenario where we're either completely remote or a portion of our students are remote, but also on these shorter modules that we're working with. I think this is a little bit heightened for new faculty because all of Bates semesters are a little bit shorter than what we might think of as a normal semester at other institutions. Closer to 12 than 14. Um, Many of us who've been here a while have some experience with short term, which introduces this a little bit. But also, our short term classes are different. I mean, that's part of the Bates culture that we're used to doing different things in short term than we do during a usual term. So, how do we take the courses that we're used to teaching in a regular Bates 12-week semester and do it in this much shorter time frame of the closer to 7-week module system that we're working with? And I just want to open by saying that, when Bates announced that this is the direction we were going, I had a moment of panic about doing that. And then I spent the next week really engaged in research around teaching writing in intensive courses. And I found it really reassuring. There's actually quite a bit of research out there on good pedagogy for intensive courses. And there's quite a bit of guidance out there for how to teach writing effectively in intensive courses. And I think one of the things that I really took solace from is that the literature really agrees that intensive courses do come with their own challenges. And they're all the ones you'd expect. I mean, students and faculty both often find just the increased, the shortened time frame challenging in terms of things just keep coming. Students have multiple assignments a week. Faculty have a lot of grading to do one after another. But the opportunity, what's so neat about intensive courses is that if you can figure out what you're focusing on in an intensive course, there's really this chance to do this thing that feels like a deeper dive for students and instructors than people are usually have the chance to get to do in a college course. So students only have 2 courses, so they get to devote a lot of their bandwidth to your course, and then the feeling of teaching intensively is very different. So perhaps we could start with just going around talking about any experience we have with this, and also if you could introduce yourself and say what brings you here to the session. So I will kick that off by saying I'm Dan Sanford. I'm the director of writing. I'm thrilled to be here with you. I'm not teaching this fall, so I'm dedicated completely to helping other people teach writing this fall. I have one experience teaching an intensive course. It was a lot of work to get it ready. It was when I was a grad student. I was teaching Linguistics 101, and it was really intensive. So the University of New Mexico had this 2-week term that fit over the winter break between the end of the fall semester and it ended January 3rd. And Linguistics 101, there's a lot of content in that course. It's a big introductory survey. And it met every day for 4 hours a day for 2 weeks. And it was hard. I mean, at the end of it, like my throat hurt. It was hard to have my voice for the rest of the days. It was really lecture intensive course, and that was a time when I hadn't queried my own use of lecture very much, so I was doing a lot of lecturing. But the cool thing was that it felt totally different from any other experience I'd had teaching that course. It felt like such a really immersive experience for the students. Like we were just all together every day in this headspace of linguistics, and I loved that. So I'm thinking a lot about that experience. Let's see, I'm going to call on people just to avoid ambiguity about who goes when. And if you don't have anything to say, you can just, shake your head or say no, that's fine. Stephanie, could I start with you? What brings you here? Who are you? And do you have any experience with teaching in intensive modules or courses?
Hi, Stephanie Wade, Assistant Director of Writing at Bates, focusing on natural sciences and some of the interdisciplines. I am here to learn more about your needs and to offer whatever insight I might have. I've taught 3 online intensive 8-week classes when I was at Unity College, and they all included quite a bit of writing. 2 were in our core GenEd sequence. They were environmental issues and insights, that's what the class was called. And I taught a humanities class called World Environmental Literature.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Allison.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Allison, and I teach in the Religious Studies department. And this semester, I'm teaching in the first module a small seminar that's also a W2. And in module B, I'm teaching an introductory course. It's a large class. It's called Intro to Asian Religions. And that class often has a semester-long research component, writing a research paper, or it can be a paper or a presentation. And so I'm trying to think about how to create something that's a manageable research writing project for that class.
Great.
Oh
Do
yeah,
they
and I've taught 2 short terms.
Okay, good. And so for that paper in your course, do they usually pick their own topic, or is it one that you?
They usually pick their own topic, and it'll be in consultation with me, but it's something that they have a lot of room to choose from, because we look at several traditions, several approaches to how we study religion academically, and so they can sort of pick and choose. And I'm not sure if that's going to work for this shorter time frame.
Great. Thank you very much. Carol.
Hello, everyone. I'm teaching a dance history class that I threw out entirely, and I'm just starting again. So, and not just because of the shortened semester and COVID, but mostly because of Black Lives Matter and anti-racism. So I'm rethinking it from the ground up instead of trying to tweak it into compliance.
That's great. I applaud that.
When I applaud it in theory, in this moment, it feels like a pretty lousy idea, but here we are.
Hopefully we can get you closer. Thanks, Carol. And have you ever taught an intensive course before? Anything?
I haven't. I did quarters in grad school and loved them. So I didn't. For the teaching part, I remember the rest. I love the intensity.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Bruno.
Hi everyone, Bruno, in the biology department, teaching a FYS for the first time, cold vaccines, and in the winter teaching developmental biology. I have taught intensive courses, but not in writing, that's for sure. So that adds an extra layer of challenge, at least to me. And just like Carol, I was ready to publish my syllabus, and I said like, oh no, this is all wrong, and now I'm back to square one.
Okay.
So hopefully I'll find some advice, or at least encouragement. We can do this.
Yes, you got that. I think, I mean, man, it is not just us in this room. I'm having so many conversations with so many people around me. So this is where we all are. So please, please take comfort in that. Laura.
Sorry, I just hopped in late. So I think I know what to talk about.
Oh, sorry. We were just introducing ourselves and also sharing if we had any experience teaching in intensive course
Right.
at any time of
So-
best course.
So I've only done a short term my first year at Bates, which was 2003. So a very long time ago, or a long time ago. And like Carol, I also was on the quarter system as an undergraduate, loved it, went pretty fast. And I am teaching for Module A. I'm teaching it's sort of a survey lit class that we have in the French and Francophone department. But we try to focus on a theme. And I decided, instead of compressing 14 weeks into 7, that I was really going to trim a lot of excess fat and kind of make this one book, also in light of Black Lives Matter, all of that. So I've got a book from a recent Congolese Belgium author. It's called Congo Incorporated. It's very, very contemporary, actual, it's relevant in terms of everything. And so I kind of bookend the class with that and lead up to it thematically, and we'll see what happens.
Great. Great. Thank you very much. Elizabeth.
Hi, so I've done short terms. They're intense and hands-on, so it's the opposite of a remote kind of class. I've never been in a quarter system ever. So this is all new to me. I'm teaching 2 sections of 29 students each of a 200 level version of my Disney first year seminar. So I'm taking out all the writing kinds of exercises and research exercises that the first years do, and just doing a sort of a much more straightforward content laden course about Disney cartoons. But I do have questions about what I can have them write. I'm planning to have them do either 2 presentations or a presentation and an essay. That's up to them. Group presentations, I should make it clear. And then a final piece written out of their data collection all term. But that essay where it's an option, I'd love to know more about how to craft that so that it's successful in this kind of intensive short version.
Okay, great. I think we will be touching directly on some of your most central questions. So
Great.
Hold that thought. That's great. Cynthia, are you there?
I am here.
Hi.
Hi, and am I unmuted? Yes. Hi, everyone. Let's see, I used to teach 10-week quarters at my previous university where I used to teach. Taught weekend workshops, which are extremely intensive kind of short courses. And I've taught short terms several times, but like Elizabeth, mine short terms have been extremely hands-on, literally.
Yeah.
It's not ever going to happen this year. So I'm teaching in the first module. The other thing I should say is that math is not my strong suit, but for the life of me, I cannot get 7, much less 7.5 weeks out of the calendars we've been given. I'm seeing barely 6 weeks. So I don't know if that's just me or what, but whatever. Anyway, I'm teaching.
Include exams. I think maybe that's what's missing. The exam period is counted.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, so I'm teaching a really tiny senior research seminar in the first module, and then in the second module, I'm teaching a 39-person course, Eve, Adam, and the Serpent, which has always been cross-listed with gender and sexuality studies and had a lot of race, gender, power, hierarchy content to it. But like Carol, I've challenged myself to increase to the extent possible those dimensions of the course, so that I have, while compressing, intensifying, and rejiggering the course. I'm also pulling things out and putting other things in that are geared towards enhancing our capacity to grapple with issues like racism, in addition to sexism and colonialism and so forth. So anyway, that's me. I can stay cosmic, or I might just go back to my other smiley face.
It is completely up to you. And I mentioned at the beginning, but for everyone who joined late, you are totally free to be muted or unmuted and to have video or not have video.
Yeah, I think you see more of me without my face here.
Thank you so much. Erica, are you there?
Hi, so I'm staying on long enough to politely say I feel like I'm at the end of my Zoom capacity, and the fact that you shared your slides made me feel like I could just like snapshot all those slides, and thank you so much for the opportunity, and goodbye.
Feel free to follow up if you have any questions. We're here.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Karen, are you there?
Yeah, hi everybody, I am here. I'm not going to show you my picture because I'm back and forth between a chair, the floor, and standing. So yeah, so I pretty much echo what everybody is saying. I'm teaching a first-year seminar on epidemics, disruption, inequalities, inequities, and change. It's a new one. I don't know why I did a new one, but I do know why I did a new one. Like Bruno, I had a syllabus already, all set to go. And like Bruno, I was like, oh, this is just not right. So my head is swirling and I feel for everybody. And I'm hoping to get some clarity and some cohesion in the assignments that I'm thinking about.
Thank you. Thank you. Beth.
Everyone.
Oh,
can you hear me?
sorry.
Yeah. I'm Beth. I'm in art and visual culture. I'm teaching Art of Islam in the fall in Module A, and as I'm finalizing my syllabus, I just want to explore my options for shorter writing assignments. Longer research projects have been my go-to, so I'm thinking about, I've got some ideas, but just would like to hear what others are thinking about. So that's what I'm here for.
Great. We have some examples for you, and I hope we can do some sharing of some things we're thinking about. That'll be helpful also. Marcel.
Hi everyone. Thank you all for hosting this. Yeah, I have I guess experience kind of mostly as a student in a quarter system. I've taught once in a quarter system, right? So 10 weeks, which pretty much kind of boils down to 8. In the module A, I'm teaching sociology of immigration. It's about sort of 35 students. It's a 200 level course. And then in module B, I'm teaching 2 sections of urban sociology that have about sort of 30 students each in the course. And so with module A, I have it sort of semi-structured with students writing memos twice a week that are on the shorter side, right, about sort of 400 words each and varying in length, and then sort of starting with kind of low kind of risk, I don't know if risk is the right word, but sort of like low assessment, sort of writing exercises at the beginning and then sort of increasing. And then I'd like as much as possible to kind of have their semester wrapped up before we roll into the last week, just to kind of create some slack and a little bit of breathing space between module A and module B for them, as well as myself.
Yes.
And so, right, 2 writing assignments a week plus a third one. They'll be screening like a documentary or a series of documentaries on Friday of every week. And then they'll have to post a video that'll be accompanied by a script. So it has to be written out and they actually have to sort of read what they wrote as well for some like accessibility issues and for a basic sense of clarity. And so, yeah, just trying to figure out, because I'll be teaching fully remote, just sort of what kind of exercises might be useful in like cultivating discussions in real time, and also, right, in the case of like what happened this morning, if Zoom is not working, which I'm sure will happen again throughout the semester, what sort of exercises, like same thing, like small sort of writing exercises can be used to sort of help facilitate engagement in the class.
Thank you so much. And do you mind, as a student, what course was that? And what was your experience like as a student in an intensive course?
In a 10-week semester? Yeah. It was fine. I think, well, I structure the course that I'm doing now to sort of be in line with that there's really sort of not much time to sort of fall off and then recover. Mm-hmm. And so my syllabus sort of tends to be weighted very heavily in the front end. And then sort of kind of reduces in intensity towards. And so, yeah, I've sort of structured it in that regard, that I don't want students kind of disappearing and then thinking they could sort of reappear without sort of, it's a difficult task to do. And so just sort of trying to put as many mechanisms in place to prevent that, to the extent that it's possible, to sort of keep folks engaged early and consistently throughout the semester. So that's been my experience, that if you fall off, it is sort of hard to recover.
That's good advice that I feel like I haven't heard before, that it's wise to front load a short semester, to try to give yourself a little bit more room. Yeah, let's see, Andi.
Hi everyone, sorry for jumping on late. I got distracted by actually prepping stuff. So I'm teaching an FYS for the fall called the communication equation. And so I've kind of thought about the idea of short writing bits in like blogs and op-ed pieces, but I'm like working on sort of how to do the actual teaching of the writing. Like, in addition to just having them write and say, well, here's an example of a blog, like what sort of information I should give them on like how to do it. If that answers the question, because I came late, Dan, so I missed what the actual question was. But if I've inferred right,
we were also sharing. You hit everything except the prompt that you didn't hear, which is, have you had any experiences teaching in an intensive semester? And if so,
no, I have not ever taught in a condensed semester, nor taken classes in one. So this will be interesting.
Good, thank you. You're in the same place as most of us. Okay, I'm going to hop back to the presentation, which, again, for those of you who came in a few minutes late, I have shared my presentation with you in the chat window. So if you click on the first link in chat, you should have access to the presentation. And I'm on the third slide, which has the heading, Assigning Less Total Writing is Okay. And I want to make 2 points about this. In an intensive semester, one of the messages that we're always trying to get across at Writing at Bates is it's really always a good thing to divide large assignments up into smaller ones. When you have those multiple, checkpoints, for students, they tend to feel like they're really coming one after another, and that can feel overwhelming. And as instructors, it can also, of course, feel overwhelming to have, especially multiple deadlines a week. Always feels for me like this is a lot of writing to respond to. One of the major reasons that we assign writing, period, is we have meetings with students. We see them Tuesday or Thursday. We see them Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We see them perhaps once a week. But when we're not with them, we want them thinking about our course. I mean, when I'm teaching linguistics, my hope is that, if I see them on Monday, by the time I see them again on Wednesday, I want them thinking about certain core concepts that we covered that day and get their brain ready for the next session. I want them doing the readings and thinking about how it fits into their evolving conception of how language is structured. Writing is a core way to do that. And it's a core reason that we use writing, right? It's to get their head on task, on the content of our course, between courses, so that it doesn't wander away, so that in the 2 days or 3 days or week between class sessions, we can keep them engaged on our course. One of the things that's really different about an intensive course, and especially an intensive course where you're seeing students every day or close to every day, so perhaps 4 times a week, as many of these courses will be in modules A and B, is their heads never leave our courses. They're seeing us every day for a very significant chunk of time. And there's not so much of a need to try to keep them engaged between courses on our course. So as you're taking a critical lens to your existing writing assignments and thinking about what am I using writing for in this course, that could be one filter that's applied to thinking about writing that could potentially be removed. But just generally, it is okay. And I offer you this reassurance sort of as the representative of the writing attentive curriculum. It is okay to assign less writing in these intensive semesters. It is indeed the case, that it's a lot to engage with writing in these courses, and it's okay to reduce the total amount of what you're doing. As you're doing that, the really critical filter to apply is, how can I use writing to support my course outcomes? What of the writing that I'm assigning is directly related to my course outcomes? And how do I use writing to support that? That's always an important question, perhaps the most important question with assigning writing. It's never more important than it is right now, because we just have less time. All of these interesting things are coming up already just in the introductions about what we're trying to do in these courses, and especially around Black Lives Matter. I think good first question to ask is, how are these reflected in my course outcomes? What do I hope my students get out of this course? And then once you have that small number of course outcomes identified, and that should be a short list for a short semester, how does my writing support those course outcomes? And any piece of writing that's there just because you feel like there should be a research paper here, they should have some kind of midterm writing assignment, it just seems like a good place to have one. If it doesn't directly speak to your outcomes, that's one to look at pretty critically about making it shorter, or perhaps it doesn't belong in this iteration of the course. Less writing is okay. I'm going to the fourth slide. Break up large assignments into smaller ones. This does a few things. So large assignments tend to be overwhelming to students for the reason that for most student writers, and especially new college writers, a very large writing assignment that comes due towards the end of the term isn't going to get a lot of attention in terms of time on task until pretty close to the due date. So when we break those things out into smaller milestones, we make it less overwhelming for students. That also addresses a really critical need of the current semester and of the world right now. We're all feeling pretty isolated. Many of our students are feeling pretty isolated. Many of our students will be remote. None of us knows yet, what campus is going to feel like, but it sounds like for students on campus, it's still going to be in many ways a pretty isolating experience. I mean, a lot of sitting in dorm rooms or in study spaces that don't feel crowded and engaging alone in the work of being a student. And we're all trying as educators in different ways to give students a feeling of community. The feeling of connection to you as an instructor is such an important part of why students feel connected to the institution and succeed in their studies and succeed as writers. When we give students many, many more opportunities to look at their writing and comment on their writing, we're creating that feeling of connection. So when we take those big assignments and break them up into a bunch of smaller ones, they feel less overwhelming for students. And it's creating more opportunities for connection with you. This also addresses how large writing assignments can feel overwhelming for us in responding to student writing. So there are a lot of papers, a lot of research that shows that when students get comments back on papers, when that feedback comes with a grade, they tend not to look at it. So, if you think of like 3 or 4 papers in a row where each one is building up, that last draft, that the ones that comes with like a B+ and tends to come with the pretty exhaustive comments, like a paragraph or two, speaking to that grade, those are the comments that students tend to look at least because it comes with a grade and it feels to them like, okay, I'm done with this. And those earlier drafts where we're supporting students' growth between drafts, those are the comments students tend to look at more because they have a feeling of, I have an incentive to look at these comments and respond to them because it's supporting where this writing is going to go in the future. So the more opportunities we give ourselves to comment on students' writing in those shorter drafts, those practice drafts, those smaller pieces of writing that come before the big piece, the less time we can actually spend on grading that last piece. Like, it is thoroughly justified to, in those big term papers that students are building up to give the grade and then give cursory, if any, comments, because you've already given a lot of input on that piece of student writing in checkpoints that felt lower stakes for them. So breaking up those large pieces of writing has a lot of advantages for students and also for you as an instructor. The other thing we can think about in a shorter term course, in these intensive courses, is shifting writing away from out of class and towards in class, right? So less of the benefit of assigning writing between classes exists in a more intensive course because we're meeting constantly. The flip side of that coin is our courses are very long. So many of these courses are lasting for 2 hours. So in those longer courses, one of the things that we know about intensive courses is it's really, really important to vary the format of instruction for obvious reasons, right? I mean, if you put yourself in the shoes of a student sitting through, 2 hours, 4 times a week, if that's all lecture, that's rough. That's a hard sell. But anything that doesn't vary a lot or is fitting a really recurring pattern is going to be challenging to keep students' attention. It's going to be really important this term to break up formats of instruction, to feel varied and keep students' attention. And this is important for remote learners too, because we're dealing with environments like all of us are in right now, where you have the instruction that's taking place on the screen, but then we all have all around us in our physical environments things that are competing for our attention. And that's going to be a big thing with our 18 to 22-year-olds. So how can we engage with that too? In-class writing is hugely advantageous here. So think about that writing that you are perhaps removing, that you are assigning students to do between class. Think about how you can shift that to in-class writing. In-class writing can be extremely low stakes. It is perhaps writing that you never see. It's perhaps writing where you cover a content in lecture and you give students to write, just take 5 minutes to write about what are the 3 biggest points for you from everything we just covered, and what's one question you have about this. And then they take the next 10 minutes to talk about that with another student in the class, or just to have that in their own notes. Students identifying their own questions is huge, and then being able to take more effective notes. Or that time spent writing in class can be directly time that they're spending on the writing you'll be assessing. So, perhaps you have a research paper coming up in 2 weeks, giving them a half hour, to develop an outline for that paper, to engage in some research for that paper, alone or in groups, is a good use of class time in this format, where we're meeting a lot more for longer, and we have this challenge of how can we break this up. Writing is a core active learning activity. So as you're thinking in your courses about, how can I involve more active learning in this shorter term course, writing is a great thing to move towards. So just a few general pedagogical things. And I'd like to go now to 2 tools that I think are going to be extremely helpful for all of us this term. Okay, so the first is the leverage principle. And this is from John Bean's ideas for engaging critical thinking in college writing. So the idea of the leverage principle is, it's sort of the inverse of how we usually assign writing in college. So a lot of college writing is we give them a certain length we're trying to meet. So we say, like, I want a 12-page paper on this topic. And then what we're essentially asking students to do is to evidence everything they've learned to give us that piece of writing. So they write it out. The leverage principle does the opposite. The leverage principle says, okay, I want a very, very short piece of writing from you. And to do this short piece of writing, you're going to have to think very, very hard about this core idea in my course. So students are doing a lot of thinking, a lot of critical thinking to create a very short piece of writing. Very short pieces of writing take much less time to grade than long pieces of writing. So the advantage for you is, instead of getting this 4 or 8 or 12-page essay to grade and read and assess, you're getting this 1-page piece of writing. But there's no pedagogical trade-off, because the work of creating that really solid, tight 1 or 2 paragraphs on a core concept in your course is a profound learning experience for your students. So let me give you some examples of what that looks like. These are all examples that are directly from John Bean's book. I have a few of these for you. Can I just give you a few minutes to look through these yourself? So you have the presentation. You don't want to hear me reading these to you. I think there's 6 slides of these. Could you just look through some of these prompts over the next few minutes, and then I'll pose a couple of questions to you after we've all had the chance to look through these, if that sounds okay to you. Great. These are slides 7 to 14, the examples. I'm going to tell you the thing that I love most about this kind of writing prompt. A lot of the type of writing that gets assigned in college teaches precisely something that we don't actually want our students to do. Like, the idea that students often have is, okay, I have to write a 10-page paper on this. I'm going into this process with starting this paper not necessarily having a clear idea of what I need to say. So the task for me is expanding what I have to say to fill 10 pages, right? So the skill that students in doing that with that prompt are practicing is taking not a lot of thinking, expanding it to fill a lot of words. So that's teaching bullshitting, right? Which is something none of us value in writing. The opposite, having people create these very short pieces of writing, that's actually a really valuable skill, right? I mean, and that's a much more common prompt. I mean, like, think of having to write an abstract for a paper. Like, this is the type of writing scenario that we deal with all the time, is take this big complex thinking and compress it in how do we get this across in 500 words, in 1,000 words. It's a much more real world writing task that students are engaging with when they're doing this. You get the idea with what these prompts look like. I mean, they're essentially all asking students to take a core concept from a course and evaluate it or assess it or judge it or apply it, and in many cases to explain it. which is really getting at the crux of active learning, right? Because it's not sort of internalizing information. It's, okay, I'm taking ownership over this. I'm in this process of saying, okay, you know, write an email to my kid brother explaining this core concept from my college course to them. I'm using language that they can understand, that a lay audience can understand. I'm writing something short, and I'm trying to really master these concepts enough to be able to relay it to someone else. So core learning moment. So these are pretty powerful, and also a big thing that are a great candidate for in-class writing as opposed to writing to assign between classes. So if we could pause for a minute with the question on slide 15, what are some of the core ideas that students explore in your course that are closely related to your course outcomes? And could each of you drop a couple of those into the chat? What are some of the core ideas in the courses you're thinking about right now? I'll give an example just from linguistics. One of the core ideas in my course is just getting students to see that different languages do very basic things in different ways, but that there are also some surprising universals. Oh, these are such nice windows into your courses. Good. Thank you so much. These are wonderful. These are still coming in, but I want to also give the next question. Okay, so could you think about the core idea that you're trying to get across to students? And many of these, you know, as they are on the page, are essentially learning outcomes. Could you think about ways that you could use the leverage principle to get at these in the writing you assign? Okay, so here's some things to think about in creating these ideas that are based on these assignments that are based on the leverage principle. So first, you're just going to tell your students what the genre is. So we're going to remove from our students the idea of you decide, you know, what questions or what topics you're most drawn to. We're going to tell them. We're going to ask them to speak directly to these ideas. We could think about giving them a template so that they don't have to puzzle over laying it out and organizing it, just giving them a pretty basic pattern to follow. Let's move this out of academic writing. So let's give this a genre that's highly informal and not a college essay, not a lab report, not any of the academic genres that they're learning as college students, so that they can be sort of removed from thinking about having their writing assessed and more just be thinking about trying to get their ideas down. And then let's give them an imaginary audience to speak to. So let's say we're turning this assignment into write a paragraph in a email or perhaps a social media post, whatever else you want to use, of just some informal, non-academic piece of writing. You're going to give them a pretty clear rhetorical situation that they can imagine themselves into. What's a writing assignment that you could give your students that they could do pretty quickly, but that they would have to think pretty deeply about that concept in order to do that? And could we try taking 5 minutes to generate some ideas there? And again, you can put those up in the chat. So could you actually try generating a prompt for your students based on the outcome that you just put into the chat? Imaginary audience, short piece of writing, informal. I love that, Elizabeth. That's great. Rewrite the ending of a Disney cartoon to emphasize counter-hegemonic lessons. Yes, love that, Alison. Love the lay audience. That's great. Oh, that's so interesting, Cynthia. Mm-hmm. Great. Andi, I love yours. I've seen some great prompts, by the way, that actually ask students to write TED Talks. Because TED Talks are such a tight, they're such a tight format. It's like it's a really clear genre. TED Talks are sort of all the same. So they make nice writing assignments because they're outside of academic writing, but they have a really clear set of genre constraints. Oh, Beth, that's great. I love this. I love that you're getting the prompt out of writing itself. Just explain to your friend, and a lot of big ideas tied up into that very, very simple on the surface prompt. Marcel, your prompt is so specific. Great. So this is just removing from students a lot of the agonizing over, what to write, what's my way in with this assignment. Students can just, even though they're big in the ideas they're engaging with, students can jump right in. Great. Good. Yeah, Carol, I love how much this is grounded in, just extremely current pop culture. This is a prompt students would really enjoy. Laura, it is super short, but that's great. that is very much very much okay with these. I mean, with prompts too, I think sometimes I am so guilty of this. My prompts routinely are more than a half a page, and I've had some great, mentors who have, who have helped me see that my students don't benefit from those. We can pose so many questions in our prompts that they become really overwhelming for our students. It's really good to have shorter prompts. Great. These are so good. Thank you so much. There's a lot of mileage to be gotten out of this. This is one thing I really encourage you to take a hard look at some of the, if you're trying to rework a syllabus from a previous semester, look at some of those long academic-y pieces of writing you may have assigned in the past and thinking about this shorter term, or really any term. How can those become much shorter assignments using the leverage principle? And also, how can you use that to create just in-class writing activities that you can use to break up those longer formats of instruction? So the big thing you want to remember, though, in grading these, and this is important because this is not about your students, this is about you, is this has to work for you too. Okay, so assigning lots and lots of short pieces of writing is fantastic. It does not have to be overwhelming. But you have to control the feedback you're giving, right? Because if you're assigning all of these, if your students are doing, 1 or 2 or 3 of these a week, and you're grading all of these as if they were all academic pieces of writing, that would kill you, right? But also, it's not necessarily beneficial to your students to do that. There are moments where we're teaching writing and we're teaching them how to write. We want them to get how to write as biologists, as religious studies scholars, as academics who study art, as all of these things, and we need to teach them the conventions that people use in those communities. So when we're teaching writing in that way and we're commenting on their writing, it's important to say, you're doing something here that doesn't fit with how we write in this academic community, and I need you to see that. Then there are other moments where we're assigning writing and we're not necessarily teaching them to write in that moment. We just want them to use writing in order to learn effectively. And all these types of assignments we just talked about, those are all writing to learn assignments. So when you're responding to those, it's really important not to respond to them in the way that you would to a learning to write assignment. Just respond to the ideas, ignore that surface polish, the grammar. Don't comment on their use of genre. Don't correct their spelling or errors. Don't point to their organizational mistakes, because what you are doing is responding to the thinking in this much lower stakes venue. That makes it more effective pedagogically for the students because they can focus on their thinking and not think about formatting it as an academic essay in the way that they think will be acceptable to their professors. And it also frees up your time to respond to the thinker behind the words and just focus on that. Okay, great. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the second and last tool that I think is pretty powerful for these shorter semesters, and that's sequencing. So in sequencing, large assignments are broken up into a series of smaller assignments that build on one another. So in sequencing, assignments build on student skills and stages as an assignment unfolds. So something that started as just a big to-do thing, usually at the end of the term, comes this smaller thing with many goalposts along the way. So students are scaffolded with sequencing. So instead of you have to reach this point, you're on your own getting there, it's saying, okay, you just have to get here, and then get here, and then get here, and then get here. Scaffolding can make a lot of things explicit that are usually implicit in college writing. One of the reasons that it works so well is there's a lot we often expect from our students that's there somewhere in our grading criteria, whether we've written them down anywhere or not. Like, for example, we want students to have a clear idea of what their argument is, and we also want them to be able to use other authors' ideas to build on their own thinking, to support their own thinking, their own arguments. That's a valued academic skill. Sequencing can really help that. Like, for example, if you're building up to a big paper where you want students to do that, it can be really beneficial to start with a small assignment where students are doing nothing but summarizing. So they just give you a paragraph. This is my summary of this writer. And you have the opportunity to comment on that, give feedback on that, or just perhaps give them the opportunity to do that so that they can do the summarizing piece and then later think about how that might fit into supporting their own argument. So perhaps that's the second assignment, is can you think about how two of the authors that we've read so far this term, how these ideas support what you have to say about this topic. So sequencing takes this really big high stakes assignment and breaks it out into a lot of smaller ones. And it provides for you many more opportunities to provide feedback on lower stakes writing. And lower stakes here just means it's less points for students. So students really stress out and focus on high stakes assignments that are worth a big portion of their grade. If you can make those lower stakes with lower point values, they're just less stressful. And again, give you more chance to offer feedback. Sequencing can happen in a lot of different ways. Here's some examples on slide 18. So a drafting sequence would take the same draft and just move it through multiple stages of revision. What's called a zero draft is generally students are writing it for themselves, and they're not really thinking about an audience yet at all. They're just trying to get their thoughts down on the page. Then moving toward a thesis draft where students are trying to organize things around an argument. Then to an oral draft where students are creating an oral presentation based on the ideas they're starting to create. Then moving toward a conferencing draft where students feel willing to share what they've written with other students in a small group. And moving towards a revised draft where students are starting to take that and turn it into the type of paper that they would hand in with you as their audience. And then moving towards an editing draft where they'd look at a sentence level and word level at their choices. Moving a paper through all of those drafts teaches the value of revision and gives lots of opportunities for feedback. You could sequence around keeping the rhetorical task the same and increase the difficulty of the reading. So you have this recurring piece of writing, like a summary or a check-in document or a journal piece of writing or an editorial or whatever the genre is. Students have that due every single week, but as they get used to that genre and comfortable within it, you're increasing the sophistication and difficulty of the readings that are supplying that. You could do sequencing around challenging students to investigate gradually more complex subjects. You could vary the audience. This is a really fun one. So, we talked about the type of assignment where students write up for a lay audience, explain this core concept from your course. So then the next week, they take the same basic prompt and they explain it to an expert audience. That encourages students to really think about the language and conventions of academic communities, thinking about writing to different groups of people. You could set up sequencing around altering the genre. So, you started out writing an editorial, now move towards writing a grant proposal. So you're thinking through argumentation and what appropriate argumentation is for different audiences. Or you could have students reflect on learning. So as students are moving through topics in your course, they can be writing up how their understanding is evolving. So, and that's fostering, metacognition, students thinking about their own understanding of the concepts in your course. So, again, let's think about your course. Okay, so if you think for a moment about the large high-stakes assignments that you're invested in, that you think belong in your course, that fit your course outcomes, that you want your students writing, how can you build up to them with opportunities for students to write to learn? And these might be assignments like the ones you generated just a moment ago, using the leverage principle. So if you think about some of the large assignments in your course, what might the opportunities be to have smaller writing assignments that are lower stakes, less stressful for students, that build up to some of the skills you hope to see them evidence for you in those large assignments? Could we take another moment for you to write in your responses to the chat on that question? I'm on slide 20. So the question is, how can you build up to those large high stakes assignments with opportunities for students to write to learn? That's great. Yeah, I love Allison, how they're getting that chance to practice summary, before they're doing anything with argumentation, and to get your feedback on that. And then also you have built in here sort of thinking about the writing process itself and reflecting on that. Great. Yeah, Elizabeth, it seems like with sequencing, like the opportunity would be to, give them the chance to, to present or, compress or summarize their data in some low stakes way before they have to give it to you in a, in a presentation or paper. So I think that seems like the fundamental challenge for you is, giving them a way to get feedback from you or others in the class or a PWSA on their interpretation of their data, in a very low stakes venue. Um, yeah, great. Stephanie, I'm reading yours about gallery walks, annotated bibliographies. Yeah, annotated bibliographies can be such an artificial exercise. Like in the Writing Center, we see so many annotated bibliography assignments where students come in with them saying, I've been asked to do this. I have no idea what it is or why I'm doing it. They can also be so good, as I know yours are, Stephanie, of annotated bibliographies can really teach students like what sources are for, when they have a clear prompt. I love how that fits in here. Yeah, Laura, picking out good quotes from articles. Yes, that's great. That's such a good example of this is something they will have to do at some point for that higher stakes assignment. You're just picking that piece out of identify the quotes you're going to use and use it in this lower stakes assignment. That's really solid use of sequencing. I think these will keep popping up. These are great examples for all of this. So there's another session today coming up at 3:30 that I know people are heading to, the panel that Krista Aronson organized. I'd like to leave a little bit of time, for folks who want to get to that. So I will try to wrap this up by 3:15 or 3:20. So if we could go ahead and just go to, how has this perhaps changed your thinking, or is there anything here that you feel like you can use in your courses, or questions that you'd love to, get the wisdom of the group on? Any closing thoughts or questions or comments or concerns from anyone here?
Hi, Dan. This has been tremendous, and I think what people have shared and sort of you being sort of explicit, I think about some things that I was doing implicitly before, has been really useful. One of the things that you said about giving them space where you're not necessarily intervening on their grammar and syntax and whatnot. How do you move from a point? So sometimes I do that with students early on, because there are times when the sort of like woeful inattention to sort of basic grammar and rereading actually gets in the way of them communicating their ideas clearly.
Yeah.
And so what's sort of a good balance to sort of strike with that, of wanting them to sort of at least be attentive to what they're writing?
I would love to hear what others in the room have to say about this. I will just say that I feel like the most important part of this is just being really explicit about, and that can just be oral, of just on this draft that's coming up on Tuesday, I am not assessing, your use of writing conventions. I'm interested in your thinking, and your grade's not going to reflect that, surface polish. And then being explicit when it is, of saying, okay, on this draft that's due in 2 weeks, I am going to make your organization, sentence structure, use of academic conventions, citation according to MLA, that will be a part of your grade. I think if you're being explicit, you're good. Oral is powerful. Rubrics are great. and rubrics just take everything you're thinking that's in your head about what's implicit about how am I grading this, and you're just putting it on the page where the students can see it, and you're telling them how you're going to take it into account in their grade. Thoughts from others on that question of how do you make that shift from writing assignments where, as I'm understanding your question, writing assignments where you're not, grading on those high stakes concerns, and writing assignments where you are?
Well, I grapple with this sort of distinction between, content and what you just called surface polish. And what I'm hearing in Mar's question, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding you, Marcel, is that sometimes the way the writing is presented, it's not clear that there is anything resembling clear thinking behind it, so that the lack of clarity in the writing, trying to, so that part of what we're challenged to do is to figure out whether this is, whether there is real content, real thinking here, despite the despite the grammar or organizational challenges that the student is facing, or whether the writing's sloppy because the thinking is sloppy, because and that so I guess my part of my response would be, when faced with something like this, I think one possible response would be, right, like Dan said, expectations up front, but also responding to student writing with questions. Did you mean this, or did you mean this? Because the way this is phrased, or your reader could understand you to be arguing this or this. I mean, that's a hell of a lot of work, though, to do that with many, many, many students. But so I'm resisting the sort of, right, I don't want to silence students by correcting their grammar and spelling and typos and punctuation and everything, and then closing them down that way. And at the same time, I'm really sensitive to the ways in which, in writing that's difficult to understand often signals a difficulty of understanding concepts and actual facility with them, that I want to address that root issue.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I will applaud the use of questions as a very effective strategy for giving feedback about content and language. And I'll also point to the concept of regression. And in the field of composition studies, there's quite a bit of evidence that demonstrates that students, as they attempt to articulate more sophisticated content in more sophisticated genres, will lose their capacity with syntax in the process of gaining as more sophisticated writers. And you can think about this as like an ice skater who's attempting a triple twirl. They could do that double twirl, but they're going to fall down when they try the triple twirl. And so we want to give them the space to learn from falling down. Otherwise, they're never going to get from that double to the triple. And so I really try to frame it as part of the process, not even a mistake. This is how we learn to articulate things that are more complicated, is by messing with language and getting stuck and pushing through that stuckness. And then, as Cynthia said, asking questions can really help students think through what they're trying to say, and also think about the syntax they're using to say it in a way that helps them become more clear. And one last point here, which is that there's quite a bit of evidence that shows when we edit for students at the same time that we give them feedback about content, they won't look at our comments about content. They will only change superficial points on their papers. And that doesn't really stick. In their less paper, they're not more likely to avoid those errors. They're just more likely to write a shorter paper next. And we in Writing at Bates are happy to work with you on these approaches to feedback, which are super related to everything that Dan's been talking about in terms of assignment design.
Bruno, you posed this really interesting question of, like, what if in a course you only did low stakes assignments? For a first year seminar, I don't think that's a bad approach. I mean, that's probably, like in higher ed, I think the extreme, the pendulum is often way over here towards really overweighting high stakes writing and not doing enough low stakes writing. I think low stakes writing can teach students how to use writing to think things through, which is so powerful. That's just one of the most important ways that academics use writing. So I don't know the answer to your question, but I'm excited by it. We're just about kissing 3:20. Any closing ideas or questions or thoughts before we break? And thank you, Stephanie, for all of those great comments and additions. Thank you all so much. There are 2 other Great Gear Up workshops coming up this week, taught by Dr. Stephanie Wade and Dr. Bridget Fullerton. And if anyone would like to speak with any of us individually about your courses, we are so very much here for that. So please just send us an email at writing@bates.edu. We'd love to talk to you. Thank you, and good luck, everyone, getting ready for next week. Nice to see you.
Thanks, you guys.